Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Today, our pleasure to have Melissa Cristina Marquez. She received a Bachelor of Science in Marine Ecology and Conservation from the New College of Florida, during which she started working on sharks, especially white sharks in South Africa. She then She then obtained a master's in marine biology, and she's now doing a PhD, still working on sharks and their relative, especially their behavior. I'm so sorry, guys. She's particularly interested in science communication. That's why she has a blog. She has a TED Talk. She also started the Finch United initiative, and she even wrote a book recently that is going to be published pretty soon. I'll give you the links to everything when I'll upload her video. So yeah, over to you, Melissa. You can now share your screen.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you everyone so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. Let me just pull up my screen and we can get started. There we go.
Just before you start, just saying again, for new people here, if you have questions, you can just post them in the chat while Melissa is talking, and I will read them in the end. Thanks.
Perfect. All right. Perfect. So you guys can all see that, and
yeah, it's fine. You can just put in.
Awesome. There we go. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Melissa Cristina Marquez, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how sharks have actually brought me to Australia, a little bit about my work, a little bit about the life lessons that sharks have taught me, and we're going to go over some shark anatomy too. So those who don't know me, there's a little bit about me. So I'm Puerto Rican and Mexican and 26 years old. I'm a marine biologist who studies sharks and their relatives, the skates, the rays, and the chimeras. They're collectively known as the chondrichthyans. I did my master's degree in Wellington, New Zealand, and studied deep sea fisheries there. And I currently live in Perth, Australia, and I'm doing my PhD there. So kind of a bit of a geography lesson for those people who don't know where Puerto Rico is. It's a very tiny island in the Caribbean near Mexico. That's where I'm from. The little dot you can see in New Zealand, that's where I moved to for my master's. And then I moved to Sydney for a little bit, just in between my degrees. And then I moved across the country to Perth, which is where I'm doing my PhD now. So what I study shark habitat use, so why they are where they are, and I use underwater video cameras, or BRUVs, and drones for my research. I also study the conflict between humans and wildlife. So that means I'm interested in seeing how our perceptions and attitudes towards sharks has actually evolved over time, and also seeing if those attitudes that we have towards them influence conservation initiatives or management in a negative or a positive way. On top of that, I also do a few other different things. I currently write for Forbes Science as a contributor, where I write about sharks, the people that study them, and why both matter. One of the reasons I do this is because I am a believer of being able to see a variety of shark news out there. Unfortunately, a lot of people just get their shark exposure in the news, and most of the times the news is about shark attacks or sharks being painted in a negative way. So I try to do the opposite of that and showcase their beauty, the science that we learn about them, the really cool things that we're learning about them, as well as the dangers that they are facing. I am also a Scholastic Author, as Dr. Maureen has said. This is actually a trio of books that is coming out starting in February 2nd, 2021. And they're actually based on my real life encounters with wildlife, with the first one actually being an encounter that I became famous for on Shark Week in regards to an American crocodile. I'm also a television presenter. I'm a podcast host. I'm a public speaker, and I've traveled around the world to not only talk about our marine ecosystems and shark conservation, but also two other topics that I'm very passionate about, which is diversity, inclusion, and equity in the scientific industry. I have a TED Talk actually talking about the representation of women in science, specifically shark scientists out in the media. And I was supposed to do another one, but that one's just put a pause right now in regards, thanks to COVID. So many people wonder why sharks. Out of all the animals that you can study, why these animals? And the first time I encountered a shark in real life was actually when I was about 14 or 15 years old and learning to dive in the British Virgin Islands. And I can still remember it clear to this day. It's actually the shark that you picture here, not the same exact one, but the species. And this is called a nurse shark. In the Caribbean, where the British Virgin Islands are, they're usually pretty chill and sit at the bottom of the ocean floor near coral reefs and kind of just watch you. They're nocturnal animals, and so during the day, they kind of just are lazy. And the first time I saw a shark was one of these and got super close to it. It didn't move. It just kind of looked at me like, what do you want? And eventually I had to leave because I was running out of air. But when I came up, I started hooting and hollering and yelling, and I was like, oh my God, I saw a shark, I saw a shark. And the people on the boat actually thought I was super afraid or angry or something like that. But then they realized, oh no, she's happy. And that's how I am every single time that I'm with sharks. And when I was under the waves with this animal, I realized that there was quite a few lessons that I could learn from sharks, but one that I learned that day was the beauty of living in the moment. So when you're scuba diving, you can't really do anything else. You have to pay attention to your surroundings, how much air you have and whatnot, but you don't have any other distractions. Like, you're not constantly on your phone. You're not waiting to hear from someone. You're just there in the moment. So the beauty of being, essentially, and it forces me to be fully present and essentially watch these animals just be sharks, which is really unique. And it's something that I think a lot of us kind of take for granted nowadays. So like I said, I realized that sharks can teach me a lot about life, not just because of their amazing evolutionary kind of takeover, since they've been here since the dinosaurs, but just in general too, such as patience. So this is one species of shark, the woebegone shark, which actually lies in wait under the sand. You can kind of see it in that animated picture there, that GIF there, where they're buried in the sand and they wait for the perfect time to propel forward and nab their prey. And so in a world where we can get quite impatient of turning our computers on or waiting to hear a response, we could probably learn a little bit from the woebegone shark of having a little bit of patience and taking your time. Another thing that I've learned about with sharks is working with the right people. So it's one really big thing that a lot of entrepreneurs and scientists in general too have to kind of pay attention. And even though there are quite a lot of species of sharks that are solitary hunters, some of them actually work together to hunt. And so one of the lessons that I've learned from sharks is surrounding yourself with intelligent people who support you and can actually interchange ideas with you. So networking is very, very important. And one of the best ways to kind of grow not only your business, but your craft, your science, and just the people that you surround yourself with. Another really big thing that I've learned about sharks is luck goes both ways. So sometimes the shark is really lucky and catches what they're trying to eat, and sometimes it gets a mouthful of seawater or sand and is left hungry for another day. So no matter how hard you work, there will be some good and bad luck that you have to have. So when you have the bad luck, you can have a little bit of time to feel sorry for yourself, but don't stay in that kind of feeling. Embrace that feeling and get back out there, because good luck is bound to come your way. And if something happens in your favor, you got to be thankful and embrace that. Another really cool thing about sharks is the adaptability. So what you see in this photo is actually a shark. It is an epaulet shark here that you find in Australia, and they are also known as walking sharks. Those side fins there that are called pectoral fins, we'll talk a little bit more about them in a bit, they have actually adapted for these animals to be able to climb over reefs because they usually live in the intertidal zone area. And in the intertidal zone area, the waves and the water actually recedes at some points, leaving these animals in little pockets of water or without water. So they have adapted to get out of that sticky situation and climb over literally bits of the reef, as you see here, into another puddle or back into the ocean. So adaptability is very much needed, and it allows you to be resourceful and see failure as an opportunity to grow rather than a defeat. Our environments are constantly changing, very much so like the intertidal zone. So in order to be successful in life, we need to adapt. The one that's underneath also the word adaptability, that is a velvet belly lantern shark. And as you can see, the fins are kind of like a blue color. They're not actually just that color, they glow that color. That's another adaptability that sharks have. Some of them actually glow in the dark, either to defend themselves from predators, attract prey, or be able to camouflage into their surroundings. Another really good lesson that sharks have kind of showed me about life is being ultra curious for its own sake. As you can see, this is a goblin shark, and what you see there is the arm of a diver. And he just wanted to figure out what the heck it was, so it tried to give a little nibble. That jaw is actually unhinging from the rest of the skull. That is something that sharks can do, and coming forward for it to give that little nibble. Curiosity is one of the best traits that a person can have, both in science, entrepreneurship, and in life in general. So definitely be curious about things. And of course, attitude is everything. So sharks have taught me that they don't second guess themselves. They are sharks. If you think you can, you are right. If you think you can't, you're right. It's all about a mindset thing, and good things take time and patience, like those woebegone sharks, and of course perseverance. So I'm a big believer of kind of manifestation and being positive when you can be. Obviously there are some situations that it's not easy to see the silver lining or the good side of something, so when you can, definitely try to. There's this quote that I kind of see go around every now and then about sharks, where it's like a baby shark is still a shark, and it's very, very true. So no matter what you are, just think of yourself as a baby shark because you're still a shark. And sharks are pretty cool. But unfortunately, they are not doing so well. So they have been around since the dinosaurs for more than 400 million years in our oceans, and quite a lot of them are in serious danger of extinction. In fact, a study just came out this past week that says that 20% extinct. And if we don't do something drastically in the next couple of years, that number will increase. So the balance of the marine ecosystem is at quite serious risk here right now. And a lot of people may ask, okay, why do we care about sharks? Why do they matter? Not only are they culturally significant in some parts of the world, such as Hawaii and here in Australia, there actually are some groups of people that still do believe as sharks as deities or gods, or are just an intricate part of their culture. They also help us economically. So shark tourism is a really big industry in the world. It brings in millions of dollars. And it's not only people paying a lot of money to go see these animals, it actually helps the local economies too. Because if you think about it, most people travel to a place to go see these sharks. So they're paying for accommodation, they're paying for food, they're paying for any touristy stuff that they do in that area on top of seeing sharks. So it is a local economy boost as well. And sharks are alive, worth more alive than they are dead. So you've got two really important aspects of sharks there, but of course, ecologically too, they're quite important. Not only do they help maintain the balance of the food chain by weeding out the dead, sick, and the dying, but their mere presence can actually influence what a reef kind of looks like. For example, if there is a coral reef and a shark patrols it at certain times, that means that there's not going to be certain fish there at certain times because they're afraid of sharks. They don't want to become the next meal, so they hide. A lot of those fish tend to be herbivores, and herbivores are those eating the algae off of the coral reefs, which they kind of need the algae off of the coral reefs. up to a certain point, because then they just start eating the coral reefs. So it changes the dynamic of what an ecosystem, what a habitat looks like just by their mere presence there. Not to mention, shark poop actually acts kind of like a fertilizer. They create microhabitats, such as when something dies and they kill it, other animals come to feast on kind of like that area for a little bit, causing a mini habitat to be formed. And also when the shark eventually dies, its body will usually float down to the bottom of the ocean floor, and a bunch of animals down there will eat its body as a source of nutrients. So really, really important animals, with quite a lot of reasons why they are important and why we need them in our oceans. So I want to talk a little bit about shark anatomy, and for that, I'm actually going to stop our video, or the sharing rather, because I have a prop with me. Now, usually when I'm back home in Perth, I've got like a little shark jar with an actual baby shark in it, but I'm currently in Sydney kind of writing out the pandemic with some family members. So I have my IKEA shark, which is Sir Chomps. He is not 100% anatomically correct, but he is for the most part correct, so we're gonna go with it. Sir Chomps is, I call him a male, but he doesn't have the claspers, which is what usually shows whether a shark is a female or a male. So we're just going to ignore that bit. He's quite sensitive about that. What people may be wondering what claspers are, essentially, if you know what male genitalia looks like, that's kind of what it looks like for sharks, except they have two of them because they usually have two little fins down here that it's an extension of. And that is the way that you can tell a female shark versus a male shark. Male sharks, claspers, except Sir Chomps. Female shark, no claspers. The rest of the anatomy is pretty much the same. So there's over 500 different species of sharks. Quite a lot of them look like this. A little fin up. Very sharky looking sharks. All sharks are covered in something that's called dermal denticles, which is actually different from what other fish are covered in. The reason for that is dermal denticles actually translates to tiny teeth. And that's exactly what sharks feel like. If you've ever touched sandpaper, that's kind of like what a shark's skin feels like, depending on the shark species. A lot of shark scientists, myself included, we have gotten something that's called shark burn. So essentially think of rug burn, but caused by a shark. Some of us have it in really bad places, like when a caudal fin or a tail fin has hit us in the face, we get it all through there. Sometimes, like for me, they tell you to sit on top of the shark to keep it from moving, and you don't think about it, and then you get it in the middle of your legs, and then you can't walk straight for like about a week, and you're kind of looking like, you know, those old Western movies where like the cowboys are kind of walking like this? That's how you're walking. It hurts. 0 out of 10 recommend getting shark burn from sharks. But the really cool thing about their dermal denticles is actually the shape of them. So depending where on the body it is, the shape actually varies. And it also varies by species. In some places, like for female sharks, there are dermal denticles that are a bit thicker in some areas, like here and like here, because this is actually where the males bite onto for sex. And so they kind of need a little bit extra protection because shark teeth hurt. Dermal denticles are amazing. It makes them hydrodynamic. So it makes it so the shark can swim quite efficiently through the water. And we've actually taken inspiration from dermal denticles, not only for swimsuits, but actually the airplane wings. So very, very cool, constantly getting bio inspiration from sharks. On their snout, you usually see like little dots that kind of look like blackheads for sharks. They're not pimples or blackheads or anything like that. They're actually called ampullae of Lorenzini, which are jelly-filled pores that pick up electrical kind of sensors from other animals. So if you're a kind of stingray hiding beneath the sand, Sir Chomps is still going to be able to find you even though he can't see you because of those electrical pulses that your heart's actually giving off. So a very cool kind of sixth sense that the sharks have, along with something that Sir Chomps won't have, because he's not that clear, but it's usually like a little line that runs around here, and that's called the lateral line. So that actually detects water pressure. differing water pressure for sharks in regards to is something moving over here or is something moving over here? That way they can better orient themselves. Next, all sharks have teeth. A lot of people ask me if sharks ever get cavities or need dentists, and no, because shark teeth actually are on kind of like a conveyor belt. And the really cool thing about that is that when one of the teeth falls off, another one is actually just right behind it, ready to take its place. Shark teeth aren't like us where they're kind of embedded in the gums. They sit on top of the gums and can kind of move around a little bit. Depending the shark species, it depends the shape of the shark. So for great white sharks like Sir Chomps, usually it's a triangular kind of shape, which is really good for cutting through blubber, meat, and bone. Other sharks like mako sharks, they have really thin needle kind of looking teeth. That's really good for catching slippery fish or squid. And there's other sharks like Port Jackson sharks where their teeth are basically just plates, and that's really good for crushing things that have shells on them. Depending the shark, it also depends how many teeth they go through. So some sharks can actually go through 30,000 teeth. In their whole entire life. Now, most people, when they see shark teeth, that's usually the only thing that we have that can actually fit of cartilage. So if you go like this to the front, what shark skeletons are made up of, which is really cool. It makes them quite light because they are quite heavy animals, so it helps them float a little bit and gives them a bit more maneuverability as well. Now, sharks don't breathe like you and I. You can kind of tell with Sir Chomps, he's got a few little slits right there. Most sharks have 5 gill slits, and this is how sharks breathe. So you might see a lot of videos and pictures of sharks where they're swimming around with their mouths quite open. That is how a lot of sharks, like great white sharks, have to continuously keep moving in order to get water through their mouth and out the gill slits. The gill slits have these little filaments that will actually extract oxygen from the ocean water around them, and that is how they breathe. They don't close their mouths, almost looking like they're yawning. That's called ram ventilation. That's another way that sharks can actually breathe. It's called almost buccal pumping is another word for it, where they're constantly forcing water to go over their gills instead. Quite a lot of sharks, when they are in currents, you might see them kind of just staying in one area. That just kind of makes it so they don't have to work really hard, first of all, but also it's just an easy way to get air in their body, which is pretty cool. Shark eyes also vary depending the species. So some sharks have really, really good eyesight. Some sharks, like the Greenland shark, that can live up to 450 years, they go blind after a while because parasites like to chill on their eyeballs for a while. So it depends the shark, how good their eyesight is, how big their eyes are. Usually if a shark has a really big eyeball, it means that it's gonna take in quite a lot of light. It's gonna see pretty well, which is cool. We have all of the different fins as well. So the most probably famous fin for a shark is this one, which is the dorsal fin. This is the one that is usually accompanied with the Jaws theme song. So if you see this fin and you don't have the Jaws theme, hear the Jaws theme song, might wanna check your hearing because it's always there. But this is also the fin that we use in regards to a lot of tagging. So a lot of tags, you'll see them, they're usually like an orangey or a red or a black color. They're real funky looking things that sometimes have a little satellite tag on top of it. And that essentially, it varies again what kind of information we get from there, but anything from pH levels to light levels, the temperature, and it just kind of gives a bit of a snapshot of what sharks are doing and where they are. So that one's really important. Those pectoral fins that I was talking about for the epaulet shark, for quite a lot of them, they are quite rigid. Fun fact, sharks actually are an animal that they can only swim forward, they can't swim backwards. So these are quite stiff, and how they work is essentially if a shark's going like this, think about it like this is the propeller going forward. This is going to tell it where the shark's going to go. So if it wants to go down, this is going to angle down and it goes down. And if it wants to go up, it'll angle these up and it'll go up. The dorsal fin kind of just keeps the shark in balance, so it's not constantly going like that. So that's basically the quick anatomy for these animals. Now, one thing you might have noticed about Sir Chomps and a bunch of other animals or sharks is this kind of counter camouflage that they've got going on. It's a white belly and then a really dark top. That's actually called counter camouflage. I just said it. And essentially what it is if you're like a seal or something and you're at the surface, if there's a great white shark underneath you, it's a bit harder to differentiate this and the ocean floor, which is kind of the same color. They're both dark. Whereas if you're a seal and you're at the bottom and you're looking upwards, the white belly kind of looks like sunlight being trickled in, or it kind of looks like the surface of the water. So this is kind of just another way of them being in stealth mode, essentially. So that's basically it for me and what I have for sharks. I'm kind of going to open it up to you guys if you have any questions about sharks that I can answer, or anything else that you kind of want to know about. I'm here to chat. Ooh, Maureen, you're still muted, I think.
Yeah. I didn't know you were expecting like so many questions and you were going to orient your talk about this. Otherwise, I could have like posted on Twitter or Instagram asking
no, you're good.
to ask questions. What we can do is, like, I've seen that in your stories there were already a few questions that were posted and that could interest a few people here. So I'm just going to get a few of these. Up.
Yeah, well, while you get one of those, I'll actually probably answer one of the biggest questions that I get, which is how can people help sharks? That's usually one of the biggest ones that I get. And it's actually quite easy how you can help sharks. One of them is by downloading a sustainable seafood app on your phone. So one of the biggest threats that sharks face isn't actually shark finning. For those who don't know what shark finning is, essentially you take the live animal, you cut off all of its fins, and then you throw it back into the ocean while it's still alive. It's quite a cruel practice, but unfortunately it is still happening because there's quite a big demand for shark fins, not only for traditional medicines, but also for shark fin soup. That's the biggest one. And so a lot of people think, because they constantly hear about that on the news, that that's the biggest pressure and the biggest threat that sharks face. And that's not it. In fact, unsustainable fishing and bycatch, or catching sharks incidentally, are the biggest threats that sharks face. So if you want to help sharks, one of the biggest ways is downloading that sustainable seafood app and being conscious of what you're putting on your plate. There's quite a lot of them worldwide that you can download, or you can actually look them up on Google before you buy any seafood. Just be like, is this sustainably caught? You can even ask the people who are providing it, be it your fishers, being it the seafood market that you're going to, or the restaurant that you're going to. Just have a chat about that and see, is it sustainably caught? Because that is the biggest question that we get, and the biggest threat that they kind of face. Another really big thing that I think helps with sharks is how we talk about them. So a lot of times when I say shark, one of the connotations that they have are they're monsters, they're mindless killers, they're man-eaters, and all of those aren't true. They're quite intelligent animals that we're actually still learning quite a lot about their complex brains. And they're clearly not stupid because they've been around since the dinosaurs. So they are very, very smart. They've lived through quite a lot of extinctions, and it's just now that they're really starting to face a bad threat, that their numbers are dwindling down, and we're starting to see quite a few of them face extinction. So how we frame our conversations around these animals, I think, is really important, because what we see through the media is a lot of times this demonization of these animals, and that didn't always exist. We had a time where we idolized them. We saw them as gods, as forces to be reckoned with, but respected and worked with. I think we kind of need to go back to that mindset of coexisting with nature. So if you hear people kind of not bad-mouthing sharks, but, saying things like, oh, it's better that they're all dead, or they're man-eaters, or all that other stuff, change the narrative and be like, okay, but why do you think that? Is it something that you know through your own research, or are you parroting what other people have said? Because I think if we change how we talk about them, we won't demonize them as much. and it'll be a bit easier to conserve them, because a lot of times it's really hard to be like, please protect these animals, and people are like, no, they're monsters. So very, very important animals that unfortunately have quite a bad reputation. That's, I guess, kind of like why me and a bunch of other people exist as their PR managers. So those are the two biggest things that you can kind of do to help sharks: is download that sustainable seafood app and talk better about sharks, have conversations about sharks, and to paint them in a different light.
Okay, so you were mentioning at the very beginning your crocodile bite when you were talking about your book. So I know exactly, of course, that story, but I'm pretty sure people who are here have no idea, because they were some of them joined a bit after you shared the talk, but I don't think these are those people. Would you mind sharing?
Yeah, so a few years ago, I was on Discovery Channel's Shark Week, which essentially, if you don't know what that is, it's a week-long dedication to just sharks on the Discovery Channel. And so I was on there 2 years ago, and during my show filming for the show called Cuba's Secret Shark Lair, I actually got bitten and dragged by a 3-meter or a 10-foot long American crocodile. Not on camera because I was by myself at that point, but you see my little GoPro like being slowly dragged in the sand. So yeah, I got bitten and dragged by a crocodile for a bit, and it kind of like, it's funny because a lot of people are like, oh, how did you stay calm? And if I tell people now, like, they're like, oh, you'd stay calm if it happened now. And I'd be like, I have no idea. I have no idea how I stayed calm, and I don't know if I'd stay calm now. So essentially what ended up happening for me is time kind of slowed down. And when it grabbed my leg, it was kind of dragging me backwards away from the studio lights that we had down there. And in my head, I was like, okay, it's definitely a crocodile, not a shark, because this is not how a shark bites you. It's definitely the croc. So don't move your leg, because crocodiles, they have something that is known as the death roll. And essentially, sorry, Sir Jumps, you will be my demonstrator. They take the animal and then they go like that with it, which incapacitates the prey essentially and kills it. I didn't want that because either from like my knee down or my leg down was going to pop off. And I was like 80 kilometers south of Cuba, like mainland Cuba. It was not going to end well for that. And also I didn't want it to bite harder, because at that point I could still think rationally, but if it bit down harder, I didn't know if it was going to hurt so much that all kind of rational thought would go out the window. So while I was doing that and I was trying to keep my legs still, my hands were still available and free. So I started looking around for a rock, or maybe because I was in the mangroves, maybe some roots to kind of hold on to. Neither of that happened. The reason why I wanted to get the rock was either to pry my leg out or hit it a few times. And then the mask that I had on, it's not like a regular scuba diving mask where you've got the mask and then the regulator. It's actually a full face mask where you can still breathe. And there's a button here that you press for you to be able to talk to the producers and for it to record your voice. So it had started acting up during this dive. And I thought, okay, maybe I just can't hear them, but they can hear me. So I hit the button and I'm like, hey, I'm getting dragged. I'm getting bit. Like, someone help. But I then found out that nobody could hear me until afterwards. So while I was trying to figure out, okay, I've still got a full tank of oxygen, so I should be good. If it drags me, I can scream really loud eventually when it lets me go. And as I'm thinking all of these things, it just eventually let me go. And I think it was because A, I stayed as still as possible, but B, I was in a neoprene suit, or my scuba diving suit. And for those who don't know what like a neoprene suit feels like, it does not feel like muscle. It feels really, it's a weird texture. Like, it gives me shivers when I touch it and I don't want to. It's like a very weird texture. And because alligator or crocodile mouths, very similar actually to shark mouths, that are very highly receptive, it must have realized, oh, this doesn't feel like what I normally eat. So it must not be food. It must just be garbage or something. And it just spat me out because it's like, nope, does not taste good. Either that or it really doesn't like the taste of Puerto Rican Mexican. I was too spicy and it was just like, no, I can't handle this. But it let me go. And I'm happy to say that the only thing that I've got is it's like a jaw mark of all the teeth, because all the teeth punctured through the wetsuit. So I've got a jaw mark on one, like the inside of my leg, and then 2 puncture wounds on the outside part of my leg where it's like 2 of its really big teeth got me. But I'm able to move around. My muscles didn't get warped or anything like that. Sometimes it like twinges if I stretch it a certain way or whatnot, but other than that, I'm good. So I got really lucky. For those people who like a little bit of gore, if you want to see the wound, just look Melissa Marquez crocodile and it'll pop up.
Okay, so nobody noticed. Like you said that you tried calling them, but like where were they? Were they really
Yeah,
going?
so what ended up happening was I actually had a dive buddy with me, as you do when you're scuba diving, and he actually motioned, hey, the dive's up, we're done. And I was like, okay, perfect. So he was on my left and he crossed in front of me to go up. I didn't want, if I went up at the same time as him, his fins were going to hit my face. And I was like, oh, I don't want to mess up the mask that seems to already be broken even more. So I'm just going to wait for a little bit. So for me, time slowed down significantly. It turns out I was gone like probably no more than 20, 30 seconds, because by the time I popped up, everyone was kind of like, where were you? But not to the point of like, oh my God, something happened. In the show, actually, you actually see footage from topside. So what's happening above? And the medic was like, where is Melissa? Like, where is she? Everyone has popped up except her. So where is she? And I remember popping up and seeing my buddy, and I could see his face being like, what's going on? Because at that point, I popped all the way up and I wasn't moving my left leg because I didn't know if it was still there. It was in quite a lot of pain, but I didn't know if it had gotten ripped off. And because it was nighttime, I couldn't see. So I was like, don't kick with that leg, because if you're bleeding out, it's probably a good idea not to kick with your leg. So I'm like kicking with my right leg. So I'm like this basically, trying to get the mask off. And because the mask is a full face mask, it has a strap here, 2 here, and 2 here. And I had gloves on and I was shaking because I was scared. So I'm shaking, trying to get these straps off, which were already really, really tight on. So he must have been able to see like something's up, because by the time I took the mask off, he was really close to me. And this is where I start, I actually don't remember bits of that night. Like I don't remember being in the water. I think I said either I got bit or I got dragged. And the next thing I remember was my scuba tank was being like grabbed and I was being hauled backwards out of the water. And Mike, the medic, actually like swan dived next to me. And he was just like, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And the only thing I remember thinking was, well, the stars look really nice, because we were in the middle of nowhere and there was no light pollution. So it looked really nice. But as soon as I got hauled out of the water, it's almost like the fog kind of lifted. And the first thing I said was it was an exploratory bite, which again is actually something that sharks do as well. They take a little bit of a nibble to figure out what something is. It's the analogy I like to use is if you see a plate of cookies on the table and you don't know if they're oatmeal raisin or chocolate chip cookies. You hate oatmeal raisin, but you love chocolate chip cookies. You take a little bit of a nibble to figure out which one it is. And unfortunately for sharks and crocodiles and alligators, their teeth aren't designed to go through us. We're not the intended prey, so when they do go through it, it can cause a lot of damage because these are hardy teeth that are supposed to go through muscles, through sinew, through bone, through blubber, sometimes through shells. So think about how easy we bleed after a paper cut, and it's no wonder you get quite bad injuries from these animals when there is a bit of conflict between humans and wildlife in an area. But I don't blame the crocodile at all. It was just doing what it's supposed to do in its own natural habitat. So I don't blame the croc whatsoever for what happened. And I'm not afraid of it.
Okay. What's your opinion on shark tourism? So you said that it was beneficial for tourism and everything, but the economy. But do you have any other opinion on that? Because you know that sometimes people will go in shark cages and feed them whatsoever to attract them.
Yeah, so I think kind of like anything, there are good players and there are bad players. There are some people out there who aren't responsible with sharks companies. They don't really follow kind of the general rules of making sure that they're not bringing the bait too close to the cage, because again, sharks can't swim backwards. So once they're kind of going at a cage, it's inevitable that they're going to run into the cage. And that's not only stressful for the people inside the cage, but the shark as well. So I think there needs to be a bit more enforcement in regards to what kind of regulations and rules there are in regards to shark tourism, to make sure that it's safe both for the people and also the animals, because there's no point in doing it if you're going to stress out the animals. To me, that takes out all the fun if you're also stressing out the animals while doing this. Shark tourism should be about seeing them in their natural habitat, seeing them thrive in their natural habitat. I'm not against bringing bait and kind of bringing them a bit closer, because heck, even when we use bait in science expeditions, you're not always guaranteed to find a shark. A lot of people are like, oh, it's a shark, it's in the ocean. And I'm like, it's a very big ocean. And compared to the ocean, even the biggest shark is very small. So I'm okay with that, but you need to be responsible and sensible about it. And you need to provide a good experience for both animals and people.
Okay. So you were saying at the beginning that you're lucky you don't have a lot of lab work. So what was a day of work look like for you?
Yeah, you know what? It really depends on whether it's field season or not. During COVID-19, it's actually quite a lot of what we normally do when we're off season, which is us behind a computer screen. A lot of people think that as a marine biologist or as a shark scientist, we're constantly out in the boats tagging sharks, chasing them and whatnot. And that's usually a really small part of what we do. We do have to eventually get those tags, get that data back and analyze it. And that can take anywhere from a few days to a few months, depending how big your data set is. That study that I mentioned earlier about the reef sharks and how their numbers dwindled down, that was over 15,000 hours of video footage that scientists from around the world had to collate together. So that's, I mean, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of hours, and of course it's a lot of money as well. So even though I personally, the science that I do, I'm not in the lab, there are quite a lot of shark scientists that are in the lab doing genetics work, doing isotope work, doing DNA work, which I guess is the same as genetics work. But yeah, there are quite a lot of people that are doing lab work as well. It's just my science in particular, that habitat use, it's more staying behind a computer screen and watching endless videos of, often than not, it's like 4 hours of just staring at blue water with every other animal except the animals that you want to see, which is the sharks. And then you get maybe 2 or 3 minutes of a shark coming by and you're like, yes, this is what I wanted. I waited 4 hours for this.
Okay. So we were talking about earlier about the Finch United initiative that you created. Mind talking a bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was in my undergraduate, I was based out of Sarasota, Florida. And I actually realized there that even though people knew about the bay, which is Sarasota Bay there wasn't any knowledge actually of the sharks and the rays that live there. People knew that they were there, but they didn't know what they were, why they were important, kind of what their role was in the ecosystem there. So with the actual support of one of the professors that I had there, I started going to different classrooms and talking to kids about the sharks of our backyard, which was Sarasota Bay. And because I was in uni, I'd have to go back every summer, every fall, and every winter back home, which was Orlando, Florida. And there I had other teachers that were my own teachers or my brother's teachers that wanted me to come in. And so every time I moved, I started doing these classroom talks. And then it kind of grew and it grew and it grew. And I started doing them via Zoom. I started doing them via Skype. I started doing them via Google Hangouts. And so eventually when I moved to New Zealand, I was like, right, I kind of have to rebrand, because it's no longer, it used to be called Sarasota Finns. It's no longer about Sarasota, it's about the world. And so Sarasota Finns grew into Finch United. And essentially what I try to do with Finch United is not only showcase different bios of all these shark skates, rays, and chimeras that you normally don't hear about on social media, on the news, on TV or movies, but also the scientists too. A lot of times when you say you're a shark scientist, people usually think you're a guy. And when I say, oh no, I'm a shark scientist, they're like, you're very small and not a guy. So I think for me, it's representation matters. So not only the diversity of sharks, because when you show them something like the epaulet shark, which is super cute and little and fits like in the palm of your hand, and you're like, that's a shark, people are like, oh, okay, so they're not all scary, man-eating, mindless killers. Some of them are actually quite cute. So I try to have that representation for the scientists, for the sharks, and also have that accessibility. So everything that I have on that website is free. It's in multiple languages. Right now, the majority of it's in English, but if you send an email, I have in Spanish and a few other languages as well that we can give you for like curriculums and quite a lot of other resources and content as well. Like we have a lot of informational coloring guides, quite a lot of infographics, and a few arts and crafts too, which are quite fun. So it's kind of like your one-stop shop for learning about sharks and what's out there.
Cool, very cool. So I just had this question. Someone else, is there one ocean or a shark fact that personally blows your mind?
Ooh, I think the shark fact that kind of blows my mind is one about their diversity, the fact that there's over 500 different species of sharks and we're constantly finding new species every year, every month. But I think the biggest kind of like, whoa, shark news that we've gotten most recently was the Greenland sharks, which Greenland sharks are this real weird looking, they kind of look like big bullets in a way. They're very ancient looking animals. They're usually in cold waters. They can live up to 450 years old. They don't sexually mature until they're around like 150. And so that an animal can live that long is quite intriguing and kind of like, holy crap. But also for whale sharks, which are actually the biggest sharks that we have in our ocean, which eat the smallest little animals, such as phytoplankton, zooplankton, fish eggs and whatnot. They actually have those dermal denticles. So that skin that we were talking about, that protective layer, they have some actually on their eyes to help protect their very, very big eyes from, well, whatever it is that they kind of run into and whatnot. It was huge when it came out a few weeks ago, of everyone being like, wait, they have teeth on their eyes? How is that possible?
That's amazing. Okay, so that was the last question. You shared a lot of questions on your Instagram account, so we might actually find a way to put this question again through the Sunday Talk account and everything, and redirecting to your account if some people are still, because there were a lot of interesting ones, so we can
definitely
share them again. Yeah, so thank you so much, Melissa.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And yeah, let's keep in touch. So everyone, as I was saying at the beginning, I will add the links of her TED Talks, her book, Finch United, and everything. So it will be on the description of her video on YouTube. You shared your hashtags on different social networks, and I really suggest you to follow Melissa because she posts a lot of very, very nice content. I would say especially Instagram is very, very nice. So thank you. And yeah, so I'll send you the link to your video soon. And for others, sorry, there is someone saying something in the chat. I'm just checking if it's not a question. No, he's just saying thank you. Yes, and you will be able to access the video in a week or two, as usual.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. Have a great one.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa.